First, China exported a virus. Countries issued a travel ban on China. Beijing called them racist. Then the virus spread to the whole world. China banned travelers from outside. Beijing called them a threat. In the meantime, China also sold substandard medical kits to the world. Called them liars. Now, China wants to sell its vaccines. Other countries are not buying them. So China is forcing their citizens. China has sent notices to 20 countries for their people to get a Chinese visa. They must get a Chinese vaccine shot. The list of countries includes India. So if you get the shot, China will quote-unquote facilitate your travel to the mainland. What does this mean? And will the world put up with this? What is the problem with Chinese vaccines? Why aren't countries buying them or clearing them by their regulator? And why is it so critical for Xi Jinping to sell them? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss Chinese vaccine nationalism and why it has become a matter of prestige for them. Also on the show, racism and gun culture in America is back in focus with another case of mass shooting, this time in Atlanta, targeting Asian American women. France is rolling out a new digital ID for its citizens. Why is the move being called controversial? We'll discuss that. Vatican says it will not bless same-sex unions. Bishops protest. And Turkey seems to have declared a war on the TV series Friends, with a leading newspaper blurring the arms of the female cast. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
US President Joe Biden has said he thinks Russian President Vladimir Putin is a killer, and he will pay the price for trying to undermine his candidacy in the 2020 presidential elections. In a new intel report, the US has said that Russian President Vladimir Putin had likely directed efforts to swing the 2020 US presidential election in favor of Donald Trump. The Kremlin has denied all such allegations, saying it never interfered in any US election. The US has sanctioned 24 Chinese and Hong Kong officials over Beijing's crackdown on the city. The sanctions were introduced under the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, which was passed by the United States last year. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken held talks with his South Korean counterpart Chung Eui-yong to discuss challenges from China and North Korea in the region. Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin earlier wrapped up crucial talks with their Japanese counterparts. As major European countries suspend the use of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine over blood clot fears, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced that he will take the AstraZeneca jab soon. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said India needs to take quick and decisive steps soon to stop an emerging second peak of the COVID-19 infections. India's daily coronavirus infections jumped by 28,903 on Wednesday. India has the world's highest tally of infections after the United States and Brazil. Myanmar anti-coup protesters in Yangon pelted army lines with firebombs improvised from glass bottles filled with gasoline after coming under what appeared to be live fire. As the crisis in Myanmar intensifies following the coup, Pope Francis appealed for an end to the bloodshed. More than 180 protesters have been killed as security forces try to crush a wave of demonstrations. Pakistan's opposition alliance, the Pakistan Democratic Movement, has postponed a long march aimed at demanding Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan's resignation. The march has been delayed over differences between the parties on the issue of mass resignations. Angry protesters used burning tires to block roads in parts of Beirut as Lebanon's economic crisis wipes out jobs and raises the risk of widespread hunger. Real Madrid have reached the quarterfinals of the Champions League for the first time in 3 seasons after a 4-1 aggregate win over Italian side Atalanta. The record 13-time champions carried a 1-0 lead into the second leg and secured a 3-1 win on the night. Karim Benzema, captain Sergio Ramos and Marco Asensio were on target for the hosts. Elsewhere, Manchester City also booked their place in the last 8 with a 4-0 aggregate win against Borussia Mönchengladbach. Golf great Tiger Woods has returned home as he continues to recuperate from injuries sustained in a car crash last month. The 45-year-old needed surgery after suffering a fractured leg and shattered ankle in the crash, which took place on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Woods thanked the medical staff at the Harbor UCLA Hospital and the Cedars-Sinai for their care and said he will work on getting stronger every day. However, medical experts are skeptical over a full-fledged return to competitive golf.
Our cover story tonight comes from China. After shutting its borders more than a month ago, China is opening up again, but only for those who take Chinese vaccines. Beijing has come up with two sets of rules. Those who take Chinese vaccines will be given quote-unquote conveniences. Those who don't will have to fill up more forms, go through tests, and once you land in China, spend up to 3 weeks in a quarantine. Even if you have been vaccinated by a non-Chinese shot, you'll have to go through this procedure. This is China's vaccine nationalism for you. It's discrimination. Beijing will make your life easier if you take a Chinese vaccine, but if you take a foreign vaccine like Pfizer or Moderna, Covaxin or AstraZeneca, you will have a tough time going to China. And here's something we must point out. All these foreign vaccines that I've just listed have proven their efficacy, while the Chinese vaccines are unproven. So why is Beijing doing this? Why is it forcing the world to take its unproven vaccines? Tonight on Gravitas, that's what we'll discuss. Let's start from the beginning. This notice from the Chinese embassy in India is where it all started. The notice says China will facilitate travelers if they take Chinese-made vaccines. It wants to resume, quote-unquote, people-to-people exchanges in an orderly manner. But here is the catch. India has not approved any Chinese vaccine. So even if you want to take a Chinese-made vaccine, you will not be able to do that in India. And here's something else that you should know. Since November last year, Indians have been barred from traveling to China. Beijing cited pandemic concerns for this ban. It suspended valid visas and resident permits. Many Indians have business interests in China. Thousands of Indian students are enrolled in Chinese university. This ban was a setback to all of them. And the situation is not unique to India. China banned travelers from most countries, giving the same reasons. And now Chinese embassies have issued similar notices to 20 countries. Take the Chinese jab and enter China more easily. This list includes names like Australia, South Korea, and the United States. Again, these are countries that have not approved any Chinese shot. And for good reason. Like I said, the world does not know much about Chinese vaccines. Beijing has not shared a lot of data about them. But that hasn't stopped China from injecting people with these shots. Since last year, China has administered tens of thousands of people with its vaccines. Now it wants to expand its market, so it is coming up with these discriminatory rules. Let's say you decide to take a Chinese shot. What do you get? Well, first of all, an unproven chemical flowing in your body. If you survive it, you also get a simplified application process. You'll need fewer documents to apply for a visa. Here's another perk. You do not need an invitation letter. What is that? Earlier, if you traveled to China for business purposes, you had to produce an invitation letter. This was given by Chinese government departments. Now it may not be needed, only if you have a Chinese vaccine. A statement issued in Germany suggested that the requirement will be waived off if you take a Chinese shot. Now, what happens if you do not take a Chinese vaccine? Well, tighten your seatbelts for the hurdle race to China. You will need the following: a negative test for the Wuhan virus, which is a reasonable demand. Then you have to obtain an antibody test. If you succeed and you land in China, you will have to go into quarantine for up to 3 weeks. Well, we hope you enjoy your stay. This is China for you, using its position as a dominant economic power to force its vaccines on the world. And I'm sure some of you are wondering, how bad can the Chinese vaccines be? To which I'll say, how big a chance are you prepared to take? And who would you rather believe, China's Communist Party or international experts? Beijing maintains that its shots are safe. But public health experts have raised concerns. They say Chinese companies have not been transparent about their clinical trials. Then we have the Chinese state media saying that more than 60 countries have authorized the use of Chinese vaccines. Earlier this month, Human Rights Watch highlighted what's worrying about Chinese vaccines. They say more than a dozen vaccines are in clinical trials in China, but as of the first week of March, none of the vaccines had received full regulatory approval. Neither have the companies released phase 3 trial data. Now, you know that phase 3 trials are large-scale studies to assess the level of protection that a vaccine gives. Instead of releasing data, China seems to be cracking down on those who advocate for vaccine safety. In October 2020, an outspoken critic of Chinese vaccine companies disappeared. Then in January, a vaccine safety advocate disappeared. This was just before the visit of the WHO team that went to probe the origins of the virus. On the Chinese internet, social media posts raising questions about the safety of Chinese vaccines were removed. At the same time, the Chinese press has aggressively tried to discredit Western vaccines. State-owned publications like the People's Daily and Global Times have accused Western media of downplaying deaths allegedly caused by the Pfizer vaccine. And we must specify here, there is no evidence so far linking the deaths to the vaccine. A prominent Chinese journalist was caught sharing unverified reports on the Pfizer shot. She claimed that 10 people died after taking the Pfizer vaccine in Germany. Later, the same tweet was amplified by Zhao Lijian, the spokesperson of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, better known around the world as China's wolf warrior-in-chief. You see, the pattern is clear. Discredit foreign vaccines and force Chinese vaccines on the world. China wants all of us to take its vaccines. In return, it promises to offer certain conveniences when we visit China. The message is simple: take our vaccine, enjoy a streamlined visa process in return. But which vaccines is China offering? Is it Sinovac, whose CEO was once found to be bribing China's drug regulator for approvals? Or is it Sinopharm, which was once called the most unsafe vaccine, one of the most unsafe, with 73 side effects by none other than a Chinese doctor? All I'm saying is that offering incentives in return for taking a vaccine may be a smart move, but when the vaccine is made in China, the same China which does not share any data whatsoever with the world, questions are bound to arise.
Sinovac, Sinopharm, CanSino Biologics, Anhui Ziwei Longcom. These are 4 vaccines that China has to offer. 2 of them are in the process of being rolled out, while 2 others have already made their way abroad. Here's what the record has been so far. Let's start with Sinovac. Developed by a Beijing-based biopharmaceutical company, Sinovac, this vaccine is officially called CoronaVac. In July 2020, it was approved for emergency use in high-risk groups in China. In India, this vaccine would cost at least 1,027 rupees per dose. How does it work? By using killed viral particles to expose the body to the virus, which mounts an immune response. How effective is this technique? It's hard to tell. There's only one study published in scientific journal The Lancet, and it discloses information only about the first 2 phases of clinical trials. Nonetheless, CoronaVac is undergoing phase 3 trials in several countries. But the data is dodgy. In Turkey, the vaccine was 91.25% effective. In Indonesia, it was 65.3% effective. Brazil initially said it was 78% effective, but revised the figure to 50.4%. Brazil even halted Sinovac trials in November 2020 after the mysterious death of a volunteer. China called it politics, until this report emerged the very next month. The CEO of Sinovac, Wei Dongyin, was caught for bribing Chinese drug regulators to get approvals several times in the past. But the vaccine continues to be developed overseas to this day. The second frontrunner Chinese vaccine is Sinopharm, developed by the Chinese state-owned company Sinopharm. It has 2 different types. Both work in a similar way to Sinovac. In India, the vaccine would cost at least 5,650 Indian rupees per dose. Phase 3 trials of Sinopharm showed that it was 79% effective, much lower than Pfizer and Moderna. But even ahead of these results, the vaccine was distributed to nearly 1 million people in China. There's no data to show that it worked. But in January this year, Tao Lina, a Chinese vaccine expert working at the Shanghai Center for Disease Control and Prevention, claimed that there were 73 adverse reactions associated with Sinopharm. High blood pressure, delayed menstruation, urinary incontinence, loss of taste, and loss of vision, to name a few. Naturally, Tao Lina's Weibo account was deleted. The allegations buried under the carpet. In Peru, a volunteer who took the Sinopharm developed neurological problems. This case was enough for Peru's government to halt all vaccine trials. China is losing the vaccine race. Its vaccine programs are shadowed by clouds of doubt. Beijing is trying to find some diplomatic sunshine through its vaccine visa. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
For China, winning the vaccine race was never an option. At least 22 Chinese institutions were pressed into action. 22. The task before them, 17 vaccine development projects. According to some reports, China developed a Wuhan virus vaccine as early as February 2020. You heard that right, February last year. It started clinical trials in March, published results in the month of May in 2020. In China's view, it was leading the vaccine race. In reality, not so much. This is the story of how China tried to cheat in the vaccine race. Let me first take you through a quick timeline. In December 2019, China finally reported the Wuhan virus outbreak to the World Health Organization. In January 2020, China exported the virus. On the 13th of January, the first case of the Wuhan virus was reported outside China. On the 11th of March 2020, the WHO declared a pandemic. By the month of May, China had successfully brought the world to a standstill. China's next plan of action was to fast-track vaccines. In May 2020, Xi Jinping declared that Chinese vaccines will be a quote-unquote global public good. But our world is smarter than what China perceives it to be. Not many countries signed up for Chinese vaccines, so the dragon began pushing its vaccines, distributing them as donation, especially to low and middle-income countries. In July 2020, China promised a $1 billion vaccine loan for Latin American and Caribbean countries. We don't know if it was ever delivered. As of March 2021, here's where China stands in the vaccine race. Our world has more than 195 sovereign states. Only 28 are inoculating its people with Chinese vaccines. Did you know China also tried to forcefully inoculate people? Take a look at this headline. If Brazil was protesting Chinese vaccines, the mood was not too different back home. In Beijing, health workers were scared to get themselves inoculated. The South China Morning Post says less than 74% of the staff in the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Beijing would get immunized voluntarily. Would you question their concerns? Chinese companies have not been transparent in announcing results of phase 3 trials. Only CanSino's vaccine has reportedly conducted trials on people above the age of 60. There are also questions on efficacy of these vaccines. In Brazil, Sinovac's trials yielded an efficacy rate of just over 50%. Elsewhere in Turkey, the UAE and Indonesia, the results were inconsistent. If there is concern, there is also competition. From Russia, Sputnik 5, the United States Moderna vaccine, the Made in India AstraZeneca jabs, the Pfizer vaccine. While the Chinese jabs crumble under tough competition, it is Chinese President Xi Jinping whose prestige is being hammered. Vaccines were his way of projecting China as a global health leader. Xi Jinping wanted to demonstrate China's technological prowess. The vaccines were his way of boosting China's influence, generating goodwill, a degree of indebtedness, perhaps even awe. It's not playing out as he planned it. The world sees through China's design, so much so that in 2020, Chinese state media Xinhua had to issue a warning. It is sinister to accuse China of vaccine diplomacy, it says. Well, Xinhua forgot that as early as March 2020, China itself had given away its sinister plot to the world. This was when a Chinese press release referred to a Chinese medical shipment as the Health Silk Road. What do you make of that? It did not take long for the world to realize that China's vaccine nationalism is pretty much an extended version of its Belt and Road project. There is no donation or development. There is only danger here. Debt trapping of poor countries. China planned, spent and schemed to win this vaccine race. Well, it lost. To whom? The country it came second to in Ladakh, India. India's vaccine metri is taking off. So far, Made in India 7 countries have been given vaccines for free. 34 countries have got vaccines under the COVAX alliance. This is according to India's Ministry of External Affairs. Well, here's some truth that may be too bitter for Xi Jinping to swallow. Vaccine was always India's race. And these are figures that you must note. In 2019, China's share in the value of unprocured medical products, UN procured medical products, was just 1.9%. India's was 21.9%. Of the 155 WHO pre-qualified vaccines, only 4 were from China, 44 were from India. India is the world's pharmacy, the world's largest producer of vaccines, and it's not even about numbers, it's about trust. India's vaccine metri is an emblem of leadership, India's role in healing the world, exemplary benevolence. Indian vaccines are proving to be the emblem of trust. Chinese vaccines, the least favored in the world. And I'm referring to this YouGov survey. And with this, I rest my case. Let's turn to the US. It's happened again. America has witnessed yet another shooting spree, this time in Atlanta. In a matter of an hour, 8 people were killed. 6 out of these 8 victims are believed to be Asians. Once again, the issue of racism and mass gun violence is back in focus in the United States. How severe is the problem and what is the government doing to fix it? Here's a report.
America has witnessed yet another shootout. A shooting spree at 3 day spas. 8 people have died. 6 of them were Asians.
Right now, it appears that all victims are female.
Okay, and race?
It appears that they may be Asian.
21-year-old Robert Aaron Long is linked to all 3 shootings. He was captured after a brief pursuit. Investigators are still not calling this a racially motivated attack.
You are investigating that this may be an attack against Asian Americans in the metro area.
Well, nothing's going to be ruled out. We're conducting a multiple homicide investigation. So wherever the evidence leads us, that's where the investigators will go.
But Asian Americans are on target in America. Racially motivated attacks, especially against Asian Americans, have been on the rise. These pictures are proof. In January, a 91-year-old man was pushed onto the ground in Oakland, California. 2 days before that attack, a woman was robbed in the supermarket. A coalition tracking reports of racism and discrimination against Asian Americans has gathered shocking data. Since last year, it has received almost 4,000 complaints. And in the last 2 months alone, Asian Americans have been targeted at least 500 times. Another report says hate crimes targeting the community have spiked by 150% in major US cities. New York alone has reported a surge of 833%. Several reports link the rising cases to former US President Donald Trump's rhetoric. Earlier this month, US President Joe Biden had taken a stand against the rising hate.
Vicious hate crimes against Asian Americans who've been attacked, harassed, blamed, and scapegoated. At this very moment, so many of them are fellow Americans. They're on the front lines of this pandemic trying to save lives. And still, they're forced to live in fear for their lives just walking down streets in America. It's wrong, it's un-American, and it must stop.
But words will not be enough. Racism, coupled with America's dangerous gun culture, creates a potent mix to fuel violence against minorities. As President Joe Biden will have to take exemplary action and build deterrence. Bureau Report, World is One.
Identity cards have become an inseparable part of our lives. We carry one to our office, to the voting booth, and not to mention when we cross national borders. The concept of an identity card is not too old though. In fact, before World War I, ID cards were barely used. But things changed in the 21st century. Our identity has been commodified. Our tastes and preferences are weighed in gold. Everyone on this planet now has an identity card. They follow a common template: name, gender, address, nationality. Basically a quick roundup of who you are. For contemporary governments, this is a potent tool. For instance, how else would you identify a citizen at the border or at the voting booth? Countries need identity cards to function seamlessly. So they're constantly on a mission to evolve better, more compact versions. And as if on cue, they always land in trouble. France has unveiled a new ID card, the same one that's on your screen right now. It's about the same size as your bank card, but a lot more sophisticated. If you look closely, it's got a QR code at the back. Below the QR code is an electronic chip. This chip is like an all-access key. It will open most doors in France, provided you are the original card holder. Inside the chip is all your personal information: name, date of birth, nationality, also 2 fingerprints. The card was unveiled by the French citizenship minister. She says preventing identity theft is top priority.
The identity card as you know it, as the French know it at the moment, it will gradually be replaced by a new object, the one we have been able to discover, more practical, new, which has a format more suitable for the pocket or the wallet. It is also an object that is more protective of our rights and more secure, which will take its place in our daily lives.
So what makes this electronic card more secure? It's the QR code at the back. Every card has a unique code. So creating a counterfeit is virtually impossible. It also helps that the card looks good. The old one was more than 25 years old. Even for an ID card, that's a long overdue facelift. Plus, this new one follows a European template. Other EU member states are also rolling out electronic cards. Europe is a highly digitized society, but that comes with a downside. Take a look at these numbers. 56% Europeans have experienced some kind of fraud in the last 2 years. 1/3 of those cases were of identity theft. Put together, they cost around 26 billion euros. That's a lot of money over a misplaced ID card. So what's the solution here? Can we turn back the clock? Reverse digitization? Let's face it, that's not an option. Technology is too good to give up. So we plug the loopholes that come with technology. There are privacy concerns over France's new ID card, a single chip that stores all personal data, a QR code to identify card holders. Some activists are not too impressed. Does this remind you of what happened in India? The row over the Aadhaar card. It was condemned as the most unsafe identity document ever. For a while, it seemed like all our data was being stored under a mattress. But for millions of ordinary Indians, Aadhaar was a ticket. A ticket to welfare schemes, a ticket to a bank account, a ticket to a better life. Is it perfect? Far from it. The Aadhaar does have its drawbacks, much like its counterparts elsewhere in the world. But that doesn't defeat the purpose of identity documents. They are potent tools in rolling out welfare schemes. Linking identity documents to welfare schemes has been controversial everywhere. Take the Social Security number in the US. Activists say it is a privacy time bomb. That by using algorithms, publicly available data can be pieced together to generate a person's social security number. Yes, it is a red flag, but cancelling social security numbers is not an option. Remember, this is the same tool that helped America recover from the Great Depression. Last year, there were reports that Britain was mulling a digital identity card. A barrage of criticism followed. It was described as government overreach. Signs of so-called big government. The fact is, we are in the middle of a public health crisis. Thousands are dying every day. Millions of jobs have been lost. We need governments to pull through. I'll end with something US President Joe Biden said last week, in fact. The government is not some foreign force sitting in a distant capital. It's all of us, we the people. The president of Tanzania is missing. I know it sounds and seems almost impossible in this day and age. We're living in the age of social media and camera phones. How could a president of all people go missing? But believe me, no one really knows where or how the Tanzanian president, John Magufuli, is. And the rumors that have emerged to explain his whereabouts are sensational. Here's a report.
His name is John Magufuli. He is affectionately called the bulldozer. Officially, he is the president of Tanzania. And he is missing. Mr. Magufuli hasn't been seen in public for the last 18 days. The 61-year-old's absence has fueled concerns about his health. But Tanzanian authorities are yet to provide any clear answers. The president was last seen looking his normal self as he swore in a new chief secretary at the State House on the 27th of February. Since then, nobody knows his whereabouts. Being a fervent Catholic, Magufuli would attend church services every Sunday, but he has skipped 3 congregations since March began. Tanzania's main opposition leader, Tundu Antipas Lissu, who is in exile in Belgium, claims that the president is on life support after contracting the Wuhan virus. He says Magufuli is paralyzed on one side and from the waist down after a stroke. Where is he being treated? At a hospital in India, says the opposition leader. Tanzania's vice president was quick to counter these claims, but only fueled more concerns by saying Tanzania is safe and it's normal for humans to get sick. So has Mr. Magufuli really contracted the Wuhan virus? Nobody really knows. All we know is that he is one of Africa's most prominent Wuhan virus skeptics. Last year, he promised the disease will be eradicated from Tanzania after 3 days of national prayer. He then cast doubts on the usefulness of vaccines and even discouraged people from wearing masks.
In this government, no one wears a mask, including me. It proves that there is no coronavirus and God loves this nation. Nothing is impossible for God, and He wants the best for us. He has blessed our beautiful country.
A pandemic is bad enough. Rumors about the top leadership right now, even worse. If the government wants to stop them, it should come clean on the status of the president. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The conflict in Yemen has been called the forgotten war. The situation is worrying, but it often doesn't make it to the headlines because it is nobody's problem. But at this rate, it could soon be. The latest developments have been described as a dramatic degeneration, a dramatic escalation. Yesterday, angry protesters stormed the presidential palace in Aden. People are angry over lack of services and poor living conditions. Yemen's top official in the United Nations has issued a warning. He says the war is back in full force.
Dozens of people stormed a government complex in eastern Yemen. They were angry over the living conditions. The government and its forces responded with bullets. These are the forces affiliated to Yemen's internationally recognized government. As they pass through the streets, they are firing gunshots into the air to disperse the crowds. But the people don't seem to be afraid. On Tuesday, hundreds stormed the presidential palace in Aden. The crowd included retired military and security officers. The situation in Yemen is getting worse by the day. These are pictures from earlier this month. A migrant center was set ablaze in Sana'a. Reports say 44 migrants were killed. Close to 200 were hurt. The survivors say they were attacked. The migrants there allegedly demanded better living conditions from the guards. Instead, they were locked inside and told to say their final prayers.
He fired a projectile at us through the hole, and the fire caught onto the piles of pillows we are sleeping on. The room filled up with smoke, and we all started to scream as we cried for help. Some of us started to faint and fall to the ground. I was near the door and I managed to come out. They locked the room on others who were still inside.
A report claims that the deadly fire was caused by Houthi forces who accidentally fired projectiles. In 2015, the Houthis had ousted Yemen's government from Sana'a, an event that had led to the intervention of a Saudi-led military coalition. The fighting hasn't stopped since. Martin Griffiths, the UN's top official in Yemen, has a warning for the world. He told the Security Council that there has been a dramatic deterioration in the ongoing conflict, and the war is back in full force. India has expressed concerns too. Speaking at the UN Security Council meeting, India's Deputy Permanent Representative called the situation worrisome and said this could open up opportunities for terrorist groups to expand.
The current escalation will also provide opportunities for terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State to spread their presence in Yemen, which is worrisome.
The escalation only worsens the situation for the people of Yemen. The UN believes that the offensive by the Houthis has now escalated the conflict, pushing Yemen, the poorest nation in the Arab world, towards a massive famine. Bureau Report, World is One.
There is no such thing as a benevolent dictator. There is no such thing as a friendly foe. And now we can say with confidence, there is no such thing as a reformist pope. Let me show you a headline from the New Yorker in 2013. The same year, Pope Francis was elected to the papacy. The reformist pope, that's what the headline says. Pope Francis came with a reputation, the poor man's pope, the first Jesuit pope and the first Latin American to hold the job. Pope Francis was supposed to drag Christianity into the new century, start radical conversations. In 2013, on his first foreign visit, this is what the Pope said. If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge? It wasn't an endorsement, far from it, but it was a baby step. And then last year, the Vatican shocked the world. A 2019 interview of Pope Francis emerged. This is what he says in it. And I'm quoting, "Homosexual people have the right to be in a family. They are children of God." So from who am I to judge to children of God, the LGBTQ community was upbeat. The Vatican soon clarified that the Pope was not calling for civil unions, but for legal protections. Nonetheless, the reformist Pope was boosting his credentials until earlier this week. The Vatican's Orthodoxy office released a statement, and I'm quoting again, "The blessing of homosexual unions cannot be considered licit. God does not and cannot bless sin." No room for any interpretation there. The Catholic Church has shut the door on the LGBTQ movement. Any hope of a Catholic embrace has disappeared. And for those wondering, yes, the statement was signed off by Pope Francis. There is a thread of hypocrisy that runs through the Vatican's position. It says homosexuals can seek blessings as individuals, but not as a couple. They want governments to guarantee legal rights for the community, the same community whose lifestyle they describe as a sin. The Vatican's promise of human equality is peppered with ifs and buts. Behind the walls of the Holy See, it's all about politics. The politics of religion. Pope Francis preaches in poetry, but he decrees in prose. The global Catholic community is divided on gay marriage. In North America and Europe, people are embracing it. But Catholicism itself is losing popularity there. Compare that to Africa, where Christianity is growing rapidly. The continent still imposes colonial-era anti-gay laws. The Vatican does not want to antagonize its new frontiers, so it strikes an unfair balance. It asks countries to protect gay rights and marriage, while refusing to do so itself. This decision has divided the Catholic Church. A group of priests in Austria are refusing to follow the Roman decree. They say they will continue to bless same-sex marriage. Gone are the days when the world of Christianity shuddered at the Pope's words. Back then, religion had a world. Today, the world has religion, among other things. But it's not just religions that have failed the LGBTQ community. Governments have too. Take Japan, for instance. On Wednesday, a Japanese court ruled that the country's failure to recognize same-sex marriage was unconstitutional. Japan is a curious case. Homosexuality has been legal there since 1880. 1880. The constitution guarantees equality irrespective of sexual orientation. So technically, gay marriage is legal. But unless the parliament passes a law, gay couples will have no protection. This is the first time a Japanese court has ruled on same-sex marriage. The verdict is encouraging. The ball is now in the government's court. Japan is the only G7 nation that has not legalized gay marriage. In 2019, 3 homosexual couples filed a lawsuit in Hokkaido. They claimed 1 million yen in damages. The court quashed their demand for damages but upheld the spirit of their request. Times change, so do people and culture. Some institutions keep up with these changes. They grow and thrive through history. Others fail to modernize. Maybe they think they're too big to fall. The Holy See may be a representative of God, but does that make it a spokesperson too? Think about it.